Coogs House. The Houston Cougars put on a historic defensive showing on Saturday afternoon, but they also had some other things going on, some wrinkles in the offense, and a big one already on Tuesday. What is this?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougars daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can't step by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can listen to Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're on YouTube, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's so good to see you again. Remember to subscribe, like and subscribe as we're getting towards 2,000. This next big giveaway marker. Hit those buttons. Let us get there. Help us get there. And if you don't know what to say, comment on the video down below to let us know you're in that contest. Yeah, fumble through that. But tell us, well, honestly, now the Texans are out of the playoffs in the NFL. Tell us, who are you watching for in the NFL playoffs if that's your jam? If that's not your jam, tell us what kind of jam you like. All right, so today's episode is going to be looking at a couple different things. But first and foremost, we're going to talk about the historic defensive effort out of the Houston Cougars on Saturday. Nearly like big time history, but certainly big time history in its own right. So just one big time if you're counting there. That's the first segment. Second segment, we'll look at how their offense played out with some adjustments to their lineups. Seems like their hand might have been forced a little bit, but it's interesting to see nonetheless. Interesting to see also, we'll get into that in a second. I think there's a lot of intrigue personally into the growth and development there. And then final segment, we're going to do a quick scout on BYU today because tomorrow's episode is a crossover with Jake from Locked On Cougars, Locked On BYU, the other show. And I want to make sure we have a chance that you and I just talk about that before we get into it with Jake tomorrow. Lots of things to get into, so let's jump on in. First and foremost, Houston did beat Central Florida 57-42. If you were under a rock, if you had a busy Saturday, if you just did not get to watch the game, I have to say 57-42 feels closer than it ever was. Now, I'm going to rattle off some things here that just made this stick out. No Central Florida starter made a 2-point field goal. No Central Florida player made a 2-pointer that was not at the rim. They were 4 of 21 from three-point range. That's 19%. 24 of their 42 points were from free throws. They shot 24 for 33 from the stripe. That's 18 points in the game from regular old field goals. 40 minutes. Field goals are typically worth 2 or 3 points. They had 18 points off of field goals. Of the 37 missed shots they had, Central Florida was only able to rebound 9 of them offensively. Jalen Sellers, their leading scorer, is averaging over 17 points per game. He had 4. Darius Johnson averages nearly 14 points per game for them. He had 3. Both those guys, that's 23.5% and 21% of their expected or season averages total. Right? That's ridiculous. So low. I cannot stress enough. Marcellus Avery, he averages 8.9 per game. He had 10. So I could see how people were like, well, he at least played well. 8 of his 10 points were from the foul line. Now he shot 8 of 8 from free throw, but that's, a lot of free throws for a guy who's been averaging 1.5 or 2 free throws a game. He's been averaging 1.5 makes on 2.2 free throws per game. And he went 8-8 from the foul line to get to double digits. He was the only guy that was in double digits for Central Florida. Central Florida only had one player make multiple field goals. One guy. He was 2 of 5 from 3, 0 of 1 for 2. By the way, that's Thierno Cilia for them. No starter had more than 5 points. And again, Avery's the only guy that had double figures. Houston had 24 points in the paint. Central Florida had 18 points on field goals all put together. Houston had 15 points out of turnovers. Again, Central Florida, 18 points on field goals. That's it. Now, they did hold UCF to the lowest field goal percentage at 15.9 on the game, the lowest field goal percentage in the history of the Big 12 Conference. 12 point something I saw would have been the all-time low in college basketball. There were stretches of the game where that was very much in play. Almost had them there. I want to steal some stats I saw from Ryan Monso of Go Cougs, so I want to make sure I credit him before I do so. But in watching the national markers as far as what Central Florida's offense did in this game, after this game, Central Florida was 308th in field goal percentage. Before it, they were 280th. That's almost 30 spots in Division One basketball. Similarly, they went from 180th before the game in scoring offense to 232nd, 50 spots in Division One basketball. They went from 280th, 305th in effective field goal percentage, which theoretically gets benefit or like in the gets benefit from shooting well from three, and they did better from three than two, I guess, but did not shoot well. Central Florida, and I think this is the thing that drove it home for me, had 64 offensive possessions. Houston had 7 blocks and 11 steals. That's 15% of Central Florida's field goal attempts got blocked. 17% of their possessions ended in a steal. That's ridiculous. Houston dominated this game from start to finish defensively. There was a stretch of about 3 minutes once Central Florida finally scored. Central Florida went almost 10 full minutes without scoring a field goal. There was a stretch of about 3 minutes from, they don't play quarters, but from kind of the start of the second quarter or so of the game after the 10-minute mark, where Central Florida rattled off 8 quick points, and they were all field goals. It looked like traditional offense. So I was like, oh, man, is Central Florida going to be able to pull this together? Because Houston did not shoot the ball particularly well themselves, and it was close, we shall say, at that point. And I had the audacity to tweet something out like, oh, man, Central Florida might be finding their form here. They did not. I was wrong. Central Florida had an abysmal day shooting the ball, and I think the interesting thing here is this is another moment where a team has a historically bad offensive day against Houston, and at some point, the national media has to be picking up on, the national fans out there of other schools and stuff like that have to be picking up on, this is not a coincidence. This is not an accident. Even in their losses, Houston is holding opponents to ridiculously low offensive outputs because they're forcing incredibly difficult shot attempts, because they're forcing incredibly rushed shot attempts, because they're forcing incredibly uncomfortable shot attempts. It's impossible to get into a rhythm like that against these Houston Cougars, and they put that on full display against Central Florida. Now, I mentioned that 24 of the 42 points Central Florida scored were on free throws. And a lot of people have a lot of issue with free throws, and I have to say there are not many. They're not zero either, but there are not many moments where I'm thinking, after watching the game twice at this point, that Houston actually did not foul the offensive player for Central Florida. Like, some of it felt ticky-tacky, but it wasn't not a foul the whole lot of the time. My bigger issue with the free throws and foul calls and stuff like that were the discrepancy from when Houston had the ball. Houston attempted just 16 free throws to Central Florida's 33. Admittedly, Houston's a very physical team. They'll probably lose the total free throw count and total foul count battle in most games. But this one felt more than it should have been one-sided on that. That's the bigger thing on the fouls to me as I watch the one. It's not that Houston didn't foul Central Florida and give up 33 free throws. They probably do need to continue to work on that if you're trying to fine-tune this machine. But on the whole, I just have a hard time believing that Central Florida only fouled Houston 16 times, right? As I look at the basketball game, I feel like Houston did a great job of driving the rim, getting to the basket, going through contact. That was my bigger problem with the refs on Saturday. I think a lot of Twitter saw the free throw discrepancy and saw the opposite end of like, Houston didn't, there's no way Houston going to call for these bogus. No, a lot of the fouls were fouls, and Houston's got to continue to get better at that. I just thought that the inverse was also happening. Speaking of things that are also happening, Houston made some lineup maneuvering in the second half of this game once they had a somewhat comfortable lead, and it involved playing a little bit different style of basketball on offense, and the basketball coach in me was intrigued. I want to talk some about that in the second segment, but first, as I mentioned in the question of the day to open the show, Houston Texans are out of the NFL playoffs, but that does not mean you can't keep on winning, because even though the NFL season is moving along into the conference championship round, you can still get in on the action at FanDuel, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. It's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. You just have to place $5. Now, as I look at this weekend, I have to say that I'm intrigued by the Baltimore Ravens, and that's probably because they are, of the teams left, the team that has 2 Houston Cougars on their roster. But they are favored by 3.5 at home to Kansas City and the Chiefs. Now, I think I'm going to take Baltimore money line and Chiefs on the spread there if I'm looking at these kinds of things. You may think I'm full of it. Whatever you think, you should go do it at fanduel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. Again, $150 in bonus bets guaranteed if you place a $5 bet. So FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, so in the second segment, I said I wanted. That's too hard to say that fast. Talk some about Malik and Ramon and Jaywan and the power forward spot, because Houston did a number of different things in the second half that used that power forward spot a lot differently on offense. Now, if you listen to the show for a long time, you know this, but I also coach. My day job as I teach middle school history, and I'm an assistant coach on a high school varsity basketball team, do a lot of film work, love breaking down X's and O's, can get really, really nerdy. And I was intrigued by Houston open up the second half, initially with Jaywan, playing a true 4-out, 1-in offense where Jaywan was lined up outside the 3-point line in a lot of sets. Now, I told you before, but if you don't remember, Houston runs a lot of NBA-style actions, just quick hitter, I do this, you do that, if this, then that kind of stuff. And it's all orchestrated. It's more like jazz music than like, I don't know, a symphony. But I will say that it's never going to be a Princeton offense looking kind of thing, but this was an intentional move where they pulled Jaywan out. And Jaywan, to his credit, Roberts is a great passer, a great passer for a guy his size. To have that great a feel of the floor around him out in space is truly, truly remarkable. And I liked him at the high post because of that. They clearly can see his game expanding outward. That has meant that he's looking for back cuts. He's looking for handoffs. He's a dynamic roll threat off of those handoffs. He does a great job of reversing floor. So if you catch him in the right wing, kicking into the left corner, he sees those kinds of passing lanes. He did a great job in his couple minutes out there. And I project the way he passed the ball so well from the mid post and the nail, the free throw line area, he'll continue to do those kinds of same things in the same kinds of actions as you move him further back, right? He handles the ball well enough, it looked like, in the couple minutes he had, to be fine out there with the power forward guarding him. Obviously, intense ball pressure will get the ball to Jamal or whatever, right? But I think what's interesting here is they're testing this out in a game that they felt fairly comfortably like they were going to win once they had the game in hand. Because truthfully, I think that was the job they kind of wanted Terrence Arsenault to fill in with, right? Terrence is a pro prospect NBA level basketball player because of his defensive intensity, because of the unique combination of fluidity and length and size he brings as a big guard at 6'5" and change with a long wingspan. Terrence is unfortunately torn his Achilles, and we're praying for the best, hoping for the best, hope for a full recovery for next season. And really a whole long career after that as well, because Terrence is really, really talented and frankly works his tail off. But it's on a great weight coming into the season. It's a long diatribe to say that Houston was going to use Terrence in that way when they moved Jaywan down to a stretch 5, a 15 foot away from the basket 5 kind of position. And last year, you saw Houston at their best offensively when Jarris Walker was playing outside the 3-point line. Jaywan was able to play about 15 feet away from the basket, and there was so much space for the guards to drive. It was Marcus Sasser driving, Tremont Mark driving, Jamal Shead driving. This year, I think the thing they wanted to do was in a switcheroo type spot, put Jaywan at the 5 on a small ball lineup, put Terrence outside. Obviously, Terrence is not Jarris, but he has a bunch of strength, and using his kind of strengths. Can't do that anymore. Now they're seeing if Jaywan can do it. And I think in the couple minutes he got to do it, he did look good. What was interesting to me was, first of all, I talk about forcing your hand and putting Jaywan there instead of Terrence. Their hand also got kind of forced on Saturday when Jamal came out and said his knee was sore. He's been battling knee soreness and some fluid and stuff, had it drained a couple times all season. So with the game in hand, they pulled him and sat him. It sounds like Kelvin Sampson said on Sunday he will play on Tuesday in Provo. So it's just precautionary, right? But you got to be safe and play it safe there. I totally get that. What they did instead was they would play a lot more of Ramon Walker, Malik Wilson, and some Damian Dunn at that power forward spot with Tugler and Francis down low. Now, Francis and Tugler both have their different strengths at the center spot. But what's interesting to me is Wilson playing the 4 is kind of a big shift in what we'd seen him doing as a backup point guard at different points thus far this season. And I say that to say that like he wasn't initiating offense like he did when he was the point. That was still up to Shead. That was still up to Cryer. Still up to Sharp some as well. But he was involved in a lot more of these handoffs and things like that. Now, Wilson finished, played 23 minutes. He had, 8 points, 7 rebounds, and frankly could have had like 14 points, and he made 2 dunks and stuff like that. Couple gimmies there in the middle. But I thought it was interesting that Wilson had a usage rate of 29.4%. That means that Wilson either scored, assisted, or shot the ball to end up, or had the turnover, I should say, to shot the ball to end the possession 29.4% of the time he was in the game. That's a really high percentage for a guy that, frankly, we kind of typically think of as a backup point guard behind like the best point guard in America and Jamal Shead, right? And so interesting to see that shift in the way they used him while he was out there. Ramon Walker also had a much better game offensively while he was out there. It was great to see Ramon get involved in this one. And frankly, after the stuff that he went through last year and just getting him back on the floor was nice in and of itself. As far as referencing goes, Ramon's usage rate was higher than it typically is at 12.9%, but still not particularly high. Ramon Walker did score in this one. He had 7 points. He had his 1 3-point field goal. I think was he 1 of 1 from 3? Yeah, 1 of 1 from 3. And then he had 4 free throws on top of that, right? So Ramon had a good game offensively, good to get him back in there. And frankly, against teams where they're not outmatched on size, Ramon Walker's toughness, his physicality, those kinds of things make him a very natural small ball 4 if they want to go to this kind of stuff. The things he brings on offense, though, are different than Malik. Malik is smoother with the ball than Ramon. Ramon will go get the ball in a dirty kind of get your the way that you see a baseball player covered in dirt with like tar on their helmet. That's the way Ramon Walker plays basketball. And so, they bring different things for sure. I'm still intrigued after a couple minutes of it of what Jawan will do if they would put him out that stretch 4 outside the 3-point line. But we also know that if that experiment goes south, that he's a great high post power forward. And so things will continue to work. I'm not saying he's going away anytime soon, but they were definitely trying to initially start to use him a little bit differently. And it'll be interesting to see how that translates against BYU as early as Tuesday or Kansas State next weekend or what have you. A bunch of different things and frankly, a continued gauntlet of Big 12 basketball coming up for the Houston Cougars. And they're about to go play the BYU, they're the Cougars as well, up in Provo. I want to talk to some about a quick scout on them in the third segment. All right, now I mentioned at the top of the show that we're doing a quick scout on BYU today because Tuesday's episode to get ready for the game is a full crossover with me and Jake. It's Locked on Cougars and Locked on Cougs doing a lot of talk about the basketball game. And frankly, both programs are having pretty good success this season. BYU's in the top 25, having a great start to the year up there in Provo. Houston obviously has been in the top 5 the entire season. And really, really like looking to make that next step into as a program from being like perennially good to being perennially great to being perennially like blue blood caliber. Houston is well on their way to doing those kinds of things. And so this is an interesting matchup for a number of different reasons. It's also 2 different schools that while BYU did not come from the American, both schools are entering the Big 12 conference, kind of stepping up to the big leagues. in everything, but certainly in men's college basketball. Obviously, where the Big 12 is the best conference in America and one of the best conferences you could argue of all time. I mean, you're seeing legitimate projections of 10 out of 14 teams making the NCAA tournament, and you're not seeing anything with less than 8, right? It's a truly powerhouse conference of all powerhouse conferences. Now, watching BYU, I watched a couple games here. I should point out what I've seen, so you know kind of what my frames of reference are. BYU has played a, a okay schedule before conference play. Big wins for them are over Central Florida on the road. I would say any road game in the Big 12 is a big win. They beat Iowa State in Provo. Iowa State the same. Iowa State to knock this off at their place. They had a big non-conference win over San Diego State. San Diego State returned a lot of their guys from that deep run a year ago, NCAA finals run a year ago. As far as Houstonians on the team, like Jalen Ledee, the star of that team in San Diego. Key losses for BYU have been to Texas Tech on the road, Baylor on the road, so a couple road losses in the Big 12. Lost to Cincinnati at home. And then they lost to Utah on the road. And while it's not far away, the University of Utah is in Salt Lake City. I'm going to guess that's like an hour away looking at a map. I don't know that. While that's a tough loss and technically on the road, I will say a rivalry game adds like a different layer to it. Utah is a common opponent, though. Tech is a common opponent, though. Central Florida, Iowa State, these common opponents. So I watched the Iowa State game. I watched the Tech game, and I'm now feeling like I need to go back and watch the Utah game. Even though Utah's not in the conference, I can't double dip in that in the same way. I do feel like I had a pretty good understanding of them beforehand. Regardless of what game you watch from them, they shoot a lot of threes. And I don't mean a lot of threes like they enjoy the three-point shot. I mean they shoot the second most threes in all of Division I men's college basketball. And while they shoot that many, they make them at a 36.8% clip. That's really high. That's like top 50 in American percentage and number 2 overall in shots attempted from behind the arc. That's dangerous, right? That's why they've won so many games. That threat is frankly why people have them doing pretty well this year, because if they get on a hot streak when the tournament comes around, they're hot, right? Now, Houston's seen a couple different teams that shoot well and shoot that often from behind the arc. The one that came to mind initially for me was Penn, because that's what Penn does to the Ivy League, and Penn might win the Ivy League this year. We'll see. Houston held them to 7-26 from the arc, and Houston does a great job against teams they know like to shoot these threes by running them off the line, having Francis ready at the rim to deter all layups, and then you're kind of making them shoot a mid-range, where if they shoot to 36.8% from a mid-range, there's actually pretty bad offense, right? And so that's what you're hoping to have done schematically, is run them off the line. Obviously, BYU is better than Penn. I imagine they'll shoot better than 27% from behind the arc. But I imagine the scheme Houston runs defensively is fairly similar, right? Running them off the line, making them attempting to make them shoot long twos instead of layups and threes, right? I will say you could see this kind of game feel like the Utah game, where Houston's got a 12-point lead and you blink into a 3-point lead because the way they hit them in bunches. Not just because they played Utah. Again, I kind of want to go watch that one again now. That's a challenging thing to do, because you can't ever really feel comfortable, especially on the road, because the momentum can only build faster for them at their home gym. They'll shoot well in their home gym. Role players shoot well in their home gym, etc. Offensively, from a scheme perspective, they rely a lot on spacing. You'll see a lot of sets where all 5 offensive players are beyond the 3-point line for BYU. Now, their centers don't actually shoot the ball that well from out there. It's not that they put them out there more as passers, and frankly, they also put them out there more to like get you away from the basket, right? They want to get a guy like Javier Francis away from the basket, and it's the goal is to get him away from the rim, I guess, so that way he can't defend it in the same kind of way. Like their big man, Noah Waterman, I think he'll be their starting center on Tuesday. He is listed at 6'11", right? Like he is a big guy, big guy. And he does, I guess, technically shoot 37% from the 3-point line. But on the whole, That's actually kind of not on the high end for them. And he's shooting just under 5 per game, right? And so on the whole for them, that's actually not that crazy high. Do I think Francis covers him? Probably. We'll see who Robertson's up on. I got my guesses on that in a second. Again, ton of spacing. They will dive the big sometimes, but a lot of big men use as passers. They play 8 guys, 15 or more minutes, which would be important playing the elevation, right? They go deep as well. The elevation, I guess, should be normal for them, but you feel me on that. Key names to stop. Obviously, Jackson Robinson is a key player for them. He leads them in points. He's a 6'7" forward perimeter-ish guy. He shoots 37.3% from 3 on 7 attempts per game. That's ridiculous if you're watching national, like shooting 7 threes per game is a lot. Shooting 37 and change from behind the arc is a lot. That's incredible. I mean, that's big time numbers from him. The other guys, Travis Nell is a 6'5" perimeter guy. He might be closer to 6'4", but let's say 6'5". And he's like top of the country caliber shooter, shooting 47% from 3 on over 6 attempts per game. Just bananas, right? And so Houston's got to find a way to get these guys off the 3-point line and got to find a way, frankly, to run them off the line and keep Francis close enough to the rim, or Roberts or Tugler or whomever, because they're going to go finish the rim if you don't, because of how much spacing they've got. Now, I do think the thing Houston does well against Robinson and Nell and any of these guys is that Houston is incredibly fast, right? Houston's so fast and so good at one-on-one defense that, honestly, while they're going to close out and force guys to run off the line, I don't know. Intuitively, I just have a hard time believing, I should say, that many guys from BYU are going to beat Houston off the bounce once they close out hard in those jump shots, right? They're going to close out hard in a way that they could get beaten. I always say as a coach that, honestly, if you're playing as tight to the ball as I need you to against a shooter especially, you're probably going to get beat a few times off the dribble just because that's the physics of it. You're that close to him. He knows where he's going and you don't. I'm more worried about the help side and helping the helper. Houston's so good at the speed in those spots that they can force more and so on and hopefully get some shot clock out of the ball spinning around a lot. But with the way that BYU shoots the ball, you're rolling dice with those. And so we'll see how that goes. We'll talk to Jake about it as well tomorrow. The one thing I do feel fairly confident in, even more so than all that, though, is that Houston should dominate the glass in this one. BYU plays 2 different 6'11" guys throughout the game, but they're so spaced out that it kind of negates any size advantage that they could have, right? The long-range shots negate any size advantage they could have because they rebound hard off the rim. You can't just park your 6'11" guys by the rim and hope to rebound soft ones that kiss off. I mean, they're coming in dive bombed, right? And so the size advantage they have, BYU will probably come into play more as they shoot over the top of shorter defenders. I mean, if they have Travis Nell and Houston puts out, Jamal Shead on him, he's got a 4-inch advantage. He can steal over the top, right? It's a much clearer jump shot kind of thing. Again, not unlike we saw with Utah, right? That's where I see the height coming into play, not on things like rebounding and stuff like that. So that's my initial read on it. Now it's late, but maybe I'm going to go pull up some of the Utah and BYU game to get ready to talk to Jake about it tomorrow, because that's the next episode. We're going to talk to Jake about the BYU game and continue to hopefully keep this Big 12 basketball winning streak going. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Locked On Cougs is a proud Locked On podcast network. And your I just stumbled over that too. Locked On Cougs is a proud Locked On podcast network. I'll never tumble over that part. We are really proud to be there. And we appreciate you making us your first listen today. If you want to go for a second, go check out Locked On College Basketball. Thank you all so much. Remember, Locked On Cougs, Premier Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Cougs, every day. Go Cougs.